This might be one of the weirdest Marvel projects I've ever seen. Welcome back, everyone. We're here to talk about Wonder Man, which was a show that I was very excited for because it seemed on the surface to be so different from anything that Marvel had done. And I'm very happy to report that it did not disappoint me. Before we get into this, I want to know, who are some other lesser known characters from Marvel Comics that you would like to see in the Marvel spotlight? Let me know down in the comments below. Wonder Man is a character piece about a working actor named Simon Williams, who is, of course, as we know in the comics, Wonder Man. And now that's not to say that this show doesn't have any merit for people that love the comics, that love the character of Wonder Man. In fact, I think it does a great job in honoring Wonder Man and the character. There are a lot of little references that you are going to pick up on if you're a fan of the character in the comics, but that's not really at its core what the show is about. The show is more focused on understanding the character from the inside out and showing us a little bit of what it's like to really be a working actor, which is probably why I love this show so much and why, for me, keep in mind that obviously proximity bias is a thing, and the fact that this show speaks to my entire life is a thing. But I think this is one of the best things I've seen in the Marvel Universe in a long time. It might be my new favorite Marvel show, and I love WandaVision. I watched WandaVision. I can't tell you how many times I watched that show, but I think Wonder Man might overtake it, honestly. The focus of the show was more about Simon wanting to be an actor and wanting to be successful in his craft and receive recognition for everything that he has worked towards, and just finally get to be in a role that he feels fulfilled in as a creative. But there's also a lot of heart to this show. And I think ultimately why I really love it is because it speaks to me as an actor. There are a lot of moments in this show that felt very real. The audition process, what it's like when you overthink a role and ultimately you kind of self-sabotage yourself as an actor because you give things more weights or more meaning than they need to have. You overstretch yourself to the point that now you're trying to make everything about your character and who you are and all of this stuff, when really your job as an actor sometimes is just to stand on the mark and say the line. It doesn't mean that your role isn't still important to the production, but sometimes a smaller role is just a smaller role. Sometimes a chair is just a chair. And seeing Simon's obsession with his work to the point that sometimes he's undermining his own talent was very relatable for me. I tend to be an overthinker a lot, and I think a lot of actors do this, and we tend to get swept up sometimes in a script and overanalyzing every little detail. There are times when I film a self-tape, and much like Simon's journey in the self-tape episode, I'm going all over the place trying to figure out the best possible way to perform this self-tape. And yet you also have to think, how do I do this without it being the same as what everybody else is doing? So you're trying to think of making these dynamic and interesting choices, but also not overdoing it, but also not doing too much. It's a very interesting balancing act. I think the other thing that I really loved about this show was the relationships. I love the friendship that we see between Simon and Trevor. I am so glad that we're actually giving Ben Kingsley more to do and just really allowing him to show his range, because in this show we get all of it. We get the drama and we get the comedy and we get the heartbreak, and there's so much honesty in this series. Simon also has a really fascinating relationship with his family, with his mom and his dad. His dad passed away, and his mom and his brother are left, and his brother basically seems to be judgmental of Simon. But I think where his brother is coming from, and something that I've seen in my own family, is sometimes there are people in your family that are just worried for you. When you decide, I would like to be a performer for the rest of my life, and that's what I want my job to be, it is very scary for some people because it is a risky business. It isn't a guarantee that you will be successful, that you will be able to feed or clothe yourself. You will probably need help along the way. And I've definitely recalled times in my life where some people in my family have showed concern, like Eric does for his brother. And it can feel like everyone's judging you as a performer. There's a moment where Eric says to Simon when he's talking about a callback that he got. Eric asks him, can you explain what a callback is? And for a moment, I was like, oh, man, this is a thing that I don't like when we do in shows, because this is a show that I feel like really doesn't hold your hand as a viewer. And in that moment, I was worried that the show was trying to use that question to explain to the audience what a callback is, the fact that you are called back in for a role. But I think in terms of the character interaction, something else that it does is you can see in Simon's response to Eric, he's annoyed by the fact that he has to explain what this is, as though Eric has used this against him before. So that when he explains what a callback is, Eric's response is, oh, so it's basically a second interview. Basically all you're getting is a second interview. You've accomplished nothing. And as Trevor goes on to explain, a callback is not just a second interview, because the fact that you were even called back is a huge accomplishment, especially for a role as big as Wonder Man, where you were the lead in a mega motion picture that will be shown in the theaters, that is also being done by a director who is artistically, creatively accomplished and looked up to. So that's a huge thing. And I mean, even when you go to the callback and you see that, I loved the callback episode. I think it was my favorite episode of the show. It's a huge deal. The callback is also super weird, but it's a huge deal because there's 3 people being considered for the role of Wonder Man and 3 people being considered for the role of Barnaby. And that's it. So it's you versus 2 other people. You have made it to the top 3. And when you realize how many people out there apply for just even something as simple as a commercial, which, by the way, is actually not that simple to land and also requires a lot of skill and talent to even be able to perform in a commercial, in a lot of instances, you will realize that getting to the top 3 is a huge accomplishment, because there are thousands of people that apply for these things. So even just getting an audition for something is an accomplishment. Seeing that disagreement between Simon and his brother was really touching for me, because it evoked an emotional response, which I'm working hard right now to not fully indulge in, because for me, I've been in those positions where people have wanted to downplay my accomplishments as a performer, which this show even does a little bit in regards to YouTube, which I was a little like, ah, but that do be how it is in Hollywood. When there's a moment when his mom is like, you got into that American Horror Story show, which Simon got fired from at the beginning of Wonder Man. So sad. And his mom's like, you're going to be on YouTube. We're so excited. And he's like, Mom, anyone can be on YouTube. And I was like, ooh, ouch. But honestly, any form of performance, anything that is even in an artistic field, whether that be in music, visual arts, acting, making YouTube videos, being a content creator, it's all very challenging in different ways, because you are putting yourself out there. And most people in their lives try to actively avoid doing that. They try to actively avoid putting themselves out there, because you are saying to the world, hi, this is me. Now everyone judge me. That's basically what happens. And as we see through Simon's journey through the show, what he learns from Trevor is how to kind of get out of his head, how to just be in his body, and how to just be himself. And the challenging part for him, and this is something that I thought was really well done, is that they use the superpowers as this idea of a wall that Simon feels he has to put up, because there is this doorman clause that's in Hollywood at the time that everyone has to sign, which says they don't have superpowers. And that is because, as we learn in one of the episodes, Doorman, who is a character in the comics as well, and I love that they actually made him Doorman, and he actually is a doorman, was a doorman at a nightclub who ended up getting superpowers after he came into contact with some Roxxon goo from a dumpster. And after he gets powers, he's using his powers in all of his acting gigs. He ends up becoming a star because Josh Gad, who's his friend from the nightclub, lifts him up, and he ends up getting some roles. And he has this kind of 15 minutes of fame, and he's pushed to the brink. He has all these bills he can't pay because his 15 minutes of fame is almost up, and he's being judged by everyone for just being reduced to basically a one-line, one-act, one-trick pony, that all he can really do is use his powers and say ding dong. And so he is not in a good place when he is brought back on to a picture to do with Josh Gad. He has to go film this scene where Josh is throwing bags through him and he runs through him. And because he is not doing well, Josh Gad disappears into him and never emerges on the other side, which is crazy. It's crazy the things also that this show does. They do things like that where it is implied that Josh Gad, I assume, since he's been missing for at least a month, I think we hear in the show, probably longer, he would have starved to death, right? Like he's not alive, I don't think. So the fact that they decided to go that dark with this, and then also during the callback episode, there's a moment which I was totally faked out. I wasn't sure what was real for a second there, where Simon punches his acting partner through his head, and they just did that. It was very well done. It looked great. So as Simon has to sign this doorman clause, when he even auditions to be Wonder Man and he has this secret, he ultimately feels as though he always has to hide a part of himself. He tries to create characters so that he doesn't have to use himself to be these characters. And what Trevor tries to tell him is that, you know, being an actor isn't about creating all of these backstories and writing down all these choices and doing all this research necessarily to craft something. It is about you experiencing the world and using those experiences and using who you are to truthfully inhabit the role of someone else. And when I was studying acting, and as I still continue to study acting, something that I feel comes up for me time and time again is this idea of you question if you are good enough. But the reality is who you are is what makes you unique as a performer. And so you should use that to the full potential that you can. Use that to make choices that only you can make. Use that to share experiences that only you have had. And use those to ground a character in truth. And the beauty of this show is that it is a superhero story grounded in the truth of what it is like to be a working actor. And something that I've always loved about Marvel, and why I think this show is such a great Marvel show, even though to some people that are fans of the MCU, I can understand why they wouldn't like it, because it isn't a typical superhero show, is that Marvel is all about the world outside your window. It's always been about grounding everything in this realistic place where superheroes exist, but they really exist to show us kind of the world around us just through a different lens and show us the potential of what we can be, to inspire us. But they don't live in these fanciful places. They're supposed to be living in and grounded in reality. And that is something that I've always felt has separated, you know, Marvel from DC, let's say. I feel like DC's characters tend to be these figures of myth, whereas Marvel superheroes, you know, like Spider-Man has to pay his bills. Similar idea here with Simon. And there are so many parallels for me as an actor, and so much of this is so eerily accurate to experiences I've had as a working actor that I really loved the show. I feel like I've never felt so seen by a piece of art before. And I think this really is art. It's really beautiful. So whether you love Marvel comics or whether you are someone that doesn't usually reach for superhero media, I think this is a show that everyone should give a try, because I think that there is a lot that you can learn about the power of celebrating who you are, especially if you're in a creative field. But even if you're not, I think that that is something that we can all take away from this that can speak to everyone. So absolutely adored it from start to finish. I mean, the only thing I'm sad about is that they dropped it all at once so that I couldn't come here every week to do a deep dive on every episode, because every episode moved me that much. And seeing Simon go through this journey where he realizes that his strength is who he is and that he doesn't have to hide it, to the point that at the end, he goes back to save Trevor from his imprisonment and has fully embraced himself to the point that he uses his powers. To me, being an actor is not about being a superstar. It's about finding truth and fully embodying it. And in order to do that, the first thing you have to really figure out is how to be true to yourself. Anyways, those are my thoughts on Wonder Man. Clearly, it's a show that touched me deeply, and I hope if you watched it that you felt some similar feelings because I think the best thing that art can do is move us and inspire us. And this is something that did that for me. And there have been many moments in my life where I've considered giving up as a performer, giving up as an actor, giving up as a content creator in so many areas of my life. And it's stuff like this that just keeps me going. So thank you to everyone that worked on this show for making such an amazing story and doing such a great job of telling it. That's all I have for this one. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. And until then, friends, stay nerdy. Bye! And if you love hearing me rant about the Marvel Universe, then you need to check out my thoughts on this. Man, do I have thoughts.